working conditions are really terrible in the factories. And we've talked about that a number of times before. And this is true in factories throughout the country, but especially in the North, the industrial Midwest and the Northeast, where you've got lots of immigrants coming in now from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, and they're being treated as second-class citizens. You have the robber barons. Remember, we talked about the captains of industry, the people like Carnegie and Rockefeller and Jay Gould, who are building these massive, massive businesses. And we're seeing the redistribution of wealth from the lower and middle classes to a very small concentrated upper class. It leads to that period that Mark Twain called the Gilded Age. Remember, gilding is a cheap, like a coating of gold over something that's kind of cheap and corrosive. And that kind of sums up this period of the 1890s going into the early 1900s, 1880s, 1890s going into the 1900s. Socially, social Darwinism, this kind of pseudo-scientific belief that evolution as applied to human beings means there are greater and lesser forms of humanity. It gets applied to race. We see that with dramatic effect in the United States during this period as they use social Darwinism to justify racism, to justify why there's an underclass, to justify poverty. And then, of course, these same pseudoscientific ideas are the ones that are going to get, regurgitated in Nazi Germany in the late 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Many new immigrants coming from Southern and Eastern Europe. Italians, Poles, Russians, Czechs, Hungarians, Bulgarians, Greeks, coming into the United States, and Serbians, people from former Yugoslavia. This is all happening at this point, and this is a wave of immigration that dramatically shapes Toledo, Ohio. Manifest Destiny becomes complete. You guys remember we said in 1890 the frontier was declared closed, and Frederick Jackson Turner writes the Frontier Thesis. This whole idea that America's interaction with the frontier, the idea that we're always struggling against something kind of dark and unknown, and boldly forging into the future as rugged individuals, that whole idea of the Frontier Thesis kind of becomes this foundational American idea. Finally, I'm sorry, not finally, we have two more until finally. We look at the geographic stuff. Cities are polluted. The working conditions are terrible. There's illness. Cities are gray, and that's going to lead to the reaction of the progressive movement. The West is conquered with Glidden's barbed wire, right? The buffalo herds are gone. And so the West is kind of domesticated by the white and African Americans going across the plains. Finally, in foreign affairs, when we look at this period between the two big wars, we have the Indian Wars. Lots of Civil War veterans, lots of immigrants, lots of African Americans fighting in 92nd Division are going to fight against Native Americans and try to wipe them out. And this is a just awful, awful thing happening. Native Americans are nearly going to be gone. People who are entirely descended from one Indian nation become almost nil after this. And it's really the end of American isolationism as a period. We're going to see kind of spasms of isolationism after this, but this is the last period where Americans really see themselves as separate from the rest of the world. So thus ends our little review of Unit 6. I hope this has been somewhat educational for you, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.